Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone to the consultant panel that we have tonight. The purpose of this is to kind of get an understanding of the different areas of consulting. It's one of those broad industries that encompasses a lot. So it's to kind of see how your skills can kind of fit into these different industries. So we have three panelists today that I'm going to go ahead and introduce. So first we have Carlos Tellez. He's a former men's soccer player who is now a senior consultant at Roland Berger. We have Caroline Sisson. She is a former women's swimmer, now a financial services senior risk consultant at EY. And we have Billy Quinn. He is a consulting manager at Deloitte, specializing in government consulting in that aspect. So, first thing we're going to do is just have everyone kind of introduce themselves, high level overview of what you do, and just talk about why you decided to go into consulting. Carlos, we can start with you.
Hey, can you hear me? Wonderful. Hey, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm Carlos Tellez. I'm a senior consultant at Roland Berger. We mostly work in strategy or investor support consulting. As Gabby mentioned, I'm a former men's soccer team player. So the reason why I went to consulting is I had a kind of a various internships after my freshman and sophomore years. And I came to the natural conclusion that I think a lot of 19-year-olds come to, which is I have no idea what I want to do after college. And I found consulting to be kind of a nice way to dip your toes in a lot of different industries and verticals, and get a lot of that initial learning experience. So I interned at Roland Berger after my junior year, had a really good experience despite it being the summer of COVID, and joined in the latter end of 2021. I've been at Roland Berger for a bit more than 3 years, working mostly across the industrials, energy, and pharmaceutical teams. So I'm happy to speak to any of those experiences.
You can't, your mic's on.
Thanks, Carlos. Caroline, if you want to go ahead.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline. I work in financial services at Ernst& Young, which is one of the big four accounting firms. We have a consulting division that I'm a part of. And in terms of pursuing a career in consulting, I actually really wanted to go into marketing. I have a psychology degree from Michigan, and I have a master's in management from Georgetown University. While I was at Georgetown, consulting was the pretty popular choice in terms of what people were applying to in the fall. And it just kind of fell into my lap. Applied for an EY position just kind of off the website, just on a whim, and ended up getting into financial services. Within our financial services department, I work within financial risk management and specifically liquidity and treasury services. So a lot of work with banks, small and large, and just making sure that they're aligning with all the regulations being put out. But yeah, happy to talk about anything finance related, anything risk related, and that's a high level summary of what's going on at EY.
Nice. Go ahead, Billy.
Hey, how's it going? Billy Quinn. I currently work for Deloitte. I got out of the Navy after 10 years as a pilot. And so I went and got my MBA at Georgetown. Very similar story. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Literally got flown off an aircraft carrier on my last day in the Navy. My wife's from the DC area, so came around here, was talking to a bunch of friends, and ended up getting a job at Deloitte on a project that does national security work. And so that's why I am where I am.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. So, Billy, we're just going to go ahead and start with you. You already talked about being in the Navy. So, what has your career path been like into consulting? How did you get where you are today?
Yeah, super weird and doesn't really align with a lot of traditional consulting backgrounds, which is one of the things that I find attractive about the industry. They're always looking for folks who have a variety of backgrounds because in part of these projects, it's forming that base of, hey, not only are you a good worker, but you're able to approach problems and solve them in a different way. So I think it was helpful from my military background. Obviously, national security kind of works. But I kind of view some of my experience in the military as similar-ish to some of the skills that we look for when we hire folks to athletics, where you have that drive, that commitment to a schedule, and you come out of this a lot more mature than a lot of your peers. I find that when we have new hires that are not used to having a schedule, accomplishing the things that they need to accomplish in order to progress on a project, on anything like that, that sort of skill is really, really beneficial, especially when you guys are coming out of playing a sport throughout in D1 athletics.
Yeah, there's definitely that similarity with discipline and drive that employers are definitely looking for. That's great. Carlos, you have anything to add?
No, I think Billy summarized it quite well. I think there's no, let's say, traditional path into consulting. You'll find a bit of everything, and that's kind of what we look for, kind of that diversity in background and experience. Let's say we're looking for soft skills in terms of being able to work in teams. Most the work you do in consulting is indeed in teams, and being able to be disciplined, which of course as student athletes is something that maybe you have a bit of a head start on. And then maybe also something worth noting is that the let's say consulting also, as I'm sure you know, at times can be for longer hours. So being able to maintain that schedule, as Billy mentioned, and work under tight deadlines is also key. But yeah, I think maybe just to reiterate, there's no orthodox path into consulting. We really do see candidates and consultants from all different branches of life, which is a cool experience.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
I think they summed it up. Nothing else on my end.
Okay. Do you want to add anything about your unique experience or any advice that student athletes can use to leverage how they might address their own path?
If she's frozen, I can add something here. So one of the most important ways to kind of break into the consulting industry is through your network that I found, and just the fact that you guys are sitting on this call, connecting with each other, but also have that strong network from Michigan athletics, and that will serve you really, really well if you're interested. So reach out to folks, make random connections, form those relationships, and that will pay like massive dividends in the future. But
Sorry, Gabby, what was the question? My Wi-Fi completely cut out there for a second.
No, you're good. Yeah, we were just talking about like what your career path has been like, and your since there isn't like an orthodox track to consulting, like anything that you can add that kind of helped you figure out your own path since there isn't like one lane.
Yeah, I would say to Billy's point, as much as you can put yourself out there, it sounds kind of funny, but you're going to hit the ground running after graduation, and it's kind of back to being a level playing field. And the fact that being a student athlete is a great thing to have on your resume, but it's not always going to like necessarily get you the job. So as much as you can leverage people who are in the Michigan network or people who were previously athletes, to form those connections and to build relationships even within a company. And then I would say the earlier the better. I mean, at the Big Four, we're recruiting class of 26 launch interns right now, which is a class that they're freshmen right now who are recruiting to be interns. And those are the people who stay in the system and usually end up getting full-time offers. So truly earlier the better. Like even if you're a freshman, sophomore, if you can start reaching out to people and you think this is your path, that's the best thing that you can be doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Maybe then just to build on that quickly, is I think it's very daunting when you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, kind of trying to figure out what that first career step is. But maybe don't, let's say, stress it too much. It's just the first like stepping stone in a journey of many, many miles. So the earlier you get involved, the earlier you can find out what you like, and equally as important, what you don't like. So it is important to get involved early and to not, let's say, overthink that first step in a very long journey, and yeah, that is your career.
Yeah. Being proactive is definitely important, but not everyone's journey is going to look the same. So that's good to highlight that. So the next question is about a myth about consulting or the consulting industry that you would like to bust. So something that people think is true, but might not be true according to your experience. So Caroline, we can start with you.
I would say, I know we touched on this earlier, but a need for some sort of specific knowledge base, I think, is something that people get a little caught up in. People ask all the time, what is consulting? And the truth is there are like too many definitions to name. I would just say that as long as you have an ability to work hard, which all of you do, and you can play well with other people, there really isn't anything in this industry that you can't somehow break into. As I mentioned, I had a psychology degree from Michigan, and now I work in financial consulting. So I think that just goes to show that if you're willing to work for it, willing to learn, you can really break into anything within this industry.
I think I was about to say something very similar, which is, and it's very sometimes intimidating at times, is that there's the, let's say, pre-existing myth that you have to be an expert in the space to start your consulting journey there. So, for example, if you're going to consult for the chemical industry, that you have to be some sort of chemical engineer, or if you're going to go into financial services, that you have to have some sort of MBA or business background. That's not the case. I think what you need to have is an appetite and an ability to learn and learn rather quickly. But from consulting projects, you're going to be jumping from client to client, from industry to industry, especially at first, as you're a generalist. So there's no, let's say, expectation for you to be an expert in the space, but you do need to be naturally curious and professionally curious and to be able to learn about that industry quite quickly on the job, right?
That's great. Go ahead, Billy.
So there's a big difference in what I like government side versus financial services and the industry side that Carolyn and Carlos work on. And I would say it used to be like Carlos and Carol, the whole joke is if you do government consulting, you're not actually doing consulting because you're doing implementation and staff augmentation stuff. I would say my experience has been that's not been true. While there are implementation projects, they are longer term. But we are still solving a lot of the very difficult problems that these clients can't solve themselves. And so while it's less financial focused, you still get to see a really cool number of things that have really high impact in the world. And so that's not the industry writ large, but within the industry, there are these two kind of, I don't know, Carlos, how would you call it? You nodded your head, but they're very different.
Yeah. I'm trying to find a way
Not talk down about me.
like this. Yeah. No, but there's different degrees of consulting, which I think is what you're aiming at. And like the way I maybe this is built on what you're saying, it's kind of a matrix. So you have your industries, which is one way. So you can be consulting for financial services, so a lot of hedge funds, investment banks, private equity firms, and so on. And then you have your industrials, which is, I don't know, companies ranging from chemicals to manufacturing plants to automotive clients, energy clients, and so on. Then you have verticals, which is, let's say, strategy consulting, implementation consulting, which is what you're discussing, investor support services. So it's kind of a matrix. And Biddy, where you are, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's government as, let's say, the industry, and then it's not so much always implementation as the vertical, but it's kind of a plethora of different problems that you're solving. But feel free to correct any of that if that's misguided.
And it used to be that government was stable and you didn't have to move around a lot, and but that's changed too. So that's a myth.
Interesting times to be in government consulting.
Oh, interesting is a word for it.
Yeah.
So you guys kind of all talked about being curious and, having this desire to learn while you're on the job and learn things quickly. Carlos, can you just talk more about what you did like in practice when there were times where you might not have known much about the industry or the field that you were working in, but you had to learn fast? Like what are things that student athletes could do in the future, things that you did that helped you make that curve?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is, as I've said before, a daunting position. So for example, let's say a typical due diligence on a target is anywhere from, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks. So you're starting on day one, you just got placed in this due diligence, which you typically investing, supporting an investment bank, private equity firm, or hedge fund, make an investment decision on a potential asset or target that they're either potentially acquiring or investing or whatnot. And you know that at the end of those 3 weeks, you're going to have to be more or less an expert on that topic to be able to give them a sound recommendation and advice. So, and on day one, absolutely nothing. So where do you even begin, right? I think first and foremost, you have to realize you have an internal network of experts you can leverage. So beginning with the partners and principals on your team that are truly experts in the field that have 25 plus years in that industry. So kind of touching base with them first and foremost, getting their perspective on the topic as well as their experience in other projects that are similar. So then you can go on and review those materials. It's a lot of research on the early end is trying to get up to speed on the industry. And one of the best tools we leverage is expert interviews. So we'll pay, let's say, retired or current professionals in that industry, frankly, like $1,000 to $2,000 an hour to just interview them, ask them sometimes basic and stupid questions to just get up to speed on the industry. But frankly, what is impressing is before you know it, let's say on week 2 or week 3, you are rather knowledgeable in the space, and you can provide really valuable insights into the space. So I think leveraging your internal networks as well as internal materials in the company is very helpful. Doing some external basic research and also leveraging expert networks, as we call them. It's, let's say, your basic toolkit in getting up to speed on a project. But it's never easy, and I think it gets easier as it goes. But even then, it's interesting to see that rather late in your career, or as you're even an experienced consulting, you'll still be faced with problems or industries that you've never seen or heard of, and you're expected to get up to speed rather quickly. But again, you develop that familiarity with the unfamiliar per se.
Nice. Anything you guys want to add to that? No? Yeah. No, that
I
was
would
good.
say, oh, sorry. I was just going to
You're
say
good.
excelling from Carlos is talking about like the more information side of it, from more of an EQ side in terms of like building relationships and excelling in building your network and, you know, like playing the politics game of whatever firm you end up joining. I think the ability to show up earlier than everyone else and leave later, and take every opportunity you have to interact with people. So if someone asks you to go to lunch, if you get invited to a happy hour, out to dinner, any of those types of things, I think that having an understanding of the material is one piece of the puzzle, and being able to interact well with others and be someone that people want to be around is another really big piece in this industry.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe to toss out a piece of very tangible advice, I'm curious to get Billy and Caroline, your thoughts on this is being in person and in office, I think makes all the difference
I
in
was
the
just
world.
going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Going in
particularly
and
as
like
a new
meeting
joiner.
people is awesome.
Yeah, there's like these very soft, like either capabilities or experiences or relationships that you can only pick up when in person, and it's not quite the same remotely, right? So when you have the ability, if you have the ability to go in person and be in that office, I think it makes a massive difference, especially as you're starting your career, as you begin to build trust and credibility within that organization. Yes, you have more leniency and more flexibility to kind of venture off and more of a flexible work environment or whatnot. But I would strongly suggest, at least at first, being in person. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. Something that we talk about a lot with our student athletes is how much relationships matter when it just comes to networking in general. But that is definitely still true when you get into the job, like building those relationships, leveraging those who have been, in the field for a lot longer, having mentors and things like that. So definitely something that I learned while I was at Michigan. So the next question is, what are some other lessons that you guys learned during your experience at Michigan that have helped you in your career? Billy, we can start with you.
I think we should start with Carlos while I think about this a little bit.
Okay.
I was just thinking that I was grateful that I hadn't started with this question because this one's an interesting one to think about. I think it's, and we've alluded to this before, it's the soft EQ, let's say relationship and team building questions that are really important. And I think that's something that we student athletes uniquely develop because regardless of what sport you play, it's more or less a team environment. And consulting work is always done in teams. You're rarely going to be faced with like a one-on-one situation. And even in those cases, you'll be working with a partner or a principal or some sort of resource. So just working in those team environments, I think is quite nice and maybe an advantage that you don't often see because it may come natural to you, but then you see in other settings, other consultants or other people that may not be, let's say, as finely tuned in a team environment struggle. So I think that's maybe the most tangible experience from Michigan, apart from classes, which maybe we can get into later.
Billy, you ready?
I mean, yeah, no, it's definitely that. Like you guys have all been on a team, right? Whether it's individual or not, you know what it's like to have someone on the team that's difficult to work with. You take those lessons from you. You take leadership lessons from that. I did ROTC, so it's getting the experiences now when you're allowed to screw up in a much bigger way and learning from that while you're in the safer environment than when you're on your own out in the world where screw ups can be a little bit worse sometimes. And then it just reminded me walking. I lived in Markley and walking outside in December through that wind tunnel, I think gave me more perseverance than I gathered from Michigan. Just walking to class and slipping on the unpaved everything. I don't.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm originally from Miami, and I was
Brutal.
not prepared to go to Michigan in the Michigan winter. So in many ways, it definitely hardened me. So I sympathize with that, really.
I would say how to handle stress was probably one of the best things that I learned at Michigan. Um, just being in an industry where things are constantly changing and you have quote unquote fire drills all the time and people who are stressed and yelling and angry. I would say that being able to like take a step back and realize that it's not that serious. And at the end of the day, it's just a job and we're not really saving lives. We're like saving people money has been really valuable and helps me on teams too. Because when people are getting really stressed, I feel like I'm in a good position to be the person who can bring that perspective of it's never that big of a deal.
Hmm. Yeah. And I know Caroline and Carlos, as student athletes, you definitely get a sense of disciplined by just sometimes having a tough coach, having to face adversity in a competition or a game. So I want to talk to you guys specifically about transferable skills that you have learned as student athletes that you utilize in your day to day. So, Caroline, you can take it if you want.
I would say stress management, people management, and time management
Mhm.
are kind of the three big things that I think day to day I use. Um, time, obviously, in the sense that we have a lot of stuff to get done and we have deadlines to get those done on. And I find myself often being the person who's, kind of running the project plans and determining when we're going to finish what. Stress, as I just kind of touched on, making sure that I'm at an acceptable stress level and the people around me are feeling the same way so we can actually get our work done. And then people management is, I know we touched on this earlier, but you're always going to have people you don't get along with, people you don't necessarily like their working styles or agree with them. So just being able to be in situations with those people and still be productive, which I'm sure you all have had experience with, is really valuable.
Yeah, maybe to build on one of those tenets that Karen mentioned is the time management piece, because I've already spoken about the others. At first, it's very difficult. I mean, you're going now in an environment where it is somewhat structured, where you have, let's say, classes, I don't know, for 3, 4 hours a day potentially, and then you can more or less structure when, if you do your work or whatnot. But it's a very different environment where you're in a professional setting, you're expected to work certain hours and oftentimes beyond those hours. So I found that the first, let's say, 6 months of consulting is just purely learning how to be an adult and how to work. And let's say a lot of things are maybe deprioritized in terms of your social life or frankly, your well-being, right? Because you're going into an entirely new setting and you're just trying to find a way to kind of excel, or not even excel, just do well, right, in that setting and adapt. And then as you build familiarity with the job and with the demands of it, you begin to structure in, okay, well, now how do I kind of build this difficult schedule with my social life and with the things I like to do, whether it's working out or cooking or this or that. And then before you know it, maybe a year in, you're juggling a lot of these things, right? But time management is key to that. And let's say don't get stressed or too upset if if at first you can't do it all at once, right? This is like natural learning blocks where at first you're just trying to do the job, and then you begin to layer on and compound different pieces of what you need to, be happy and excel in other things outside of work. But yes, the time management is key to it.
Yeah. I think we kind of all go through that transition in college anyway of just like
Yeah.
knowing that you have to prioritize it and anything, whatever you're doing, and that you can't do it all. And so, Billy, asking you as a Michigan student, how did you kind of hone in your time management skills transitioning out of high school and then into your career as well?
The military kind of forces you to do it.
Yeah, I bet.
I like to think it's a somewhat similar experience as some of these athletic teams, but it doesn't really hit you until after when you go to flight school, when you're doing all of these things that like kind of are life and death, and you become adaptable to stress management. So I think they're really similar to like what Carolyn said when, you guys have had you're used to a certain amount of stress, to where you'll just react a lot better. You're used to having, well, you may not dictate entirely your own schedules, but you're used to being able to accomplish so much, versus we all know guys and girls who go to Michigan and don't do half the things that you guys do. So I think that sets you up well.
Yeah. You're kind of already touching on the next question, actually, which is why do student athletes excel in consulting related positions? So, if you guys have any like specific examples of, um, I guess, things that have happened in your position as an athlete or, as a military veteran, like what, like a story or like an example of like a way that you've seen those skills, transfer and then how you like excelled out of like a difficult situation. I'll
Yes.
give you a second.
So I guess I've had a few folks, and it literally is being able to adapt and overcome stress. I've seen some of our young folks just kind of break down because it's the first time in their lives that they've had competing priorities. They are feeling it from all sides. And it's the resiliency that you guys have learned throughout your entire careers that have been an asset. If I ever see anyone with a background in, the military or in college athletics, especially D1 athletics, I will almost always give them a second look as to like, oh, I want them on my team for those skills alone, especially as really young folks. It's so that I think it's super transferable in that aspect.
Yeah. Carlos, do you want to add anything?
No, maybe I'll say that while, let's say, certain backgrounds, such as what Billy was referring to in either military or athletics, certainly warrant a second look, it's also really important that you build a robust background in professional experiences as well. Because while, let's say, a military or a student athlete experience may get you a second look, if you don't have a well-rounded resume with other experiences that are relevant to consulting, that won't get you, frankly, very far. So it's important to build that, let's say, robust um, resume or background.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I would just say, kind of back to Billy's point about what sets student athletes apart, adaptability in a sense. I know when I was on the swim team, I don't know if it still is, but sudden change was something that was kind of preached all the time. And it's something that I've gotten to live in the professional world, and I can tell you it's not as fun as it was at Michigan. But just being able to adapt quickly to different situations, to kind of think on your feet and understand that, like Billy said, the stress management piece of it, but also being able to pivot quickly and find solutions for whatever problem comes your way.
Yeah, adaptability is definitely an important one as well. So this next question is interesting, but like, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
The money. Um, Honestly, that is a huge part of it, right? Like in the world, the consultants are well paid. especially for generalists. So for me, right, I have no financial background, et cetera. Consultancy was a logical choice because when you do the kind of curve of comp versus experience, it kind of came out on top. I could say, being able to have a lot of different experiences and the adaptability and the kind of generalist nature of it is also rewarding. But I'm at the point in my career now where it's all going back to selling. So one of the things that I think in this career you'll always find is that you are constantly learning new skills, but you're also constantly falling back on people skills and your relationships, because as you progress throughout your career, it literally all comes down to how much work you can sell, which comes through your relationships. At least has been my experience. Obviously, you guys may have different in different sectors, but
No, I entirely second that. I mean, there is no secret that the financial compensation is quite strong and quite attractive in consulting, whatever area you choose in consulting. But then there's also a lot of, let's say, fulfillment and purpose from coming from doing difficult stuff. And I think many times it's very difficult projects you take on. So the situation I was describing earlier, it's okay, day one, you're on a DD and you're looking ahead for 3 weeks and you have no experience in the subject, right? And then you have one way or another, you happen to get through it and you do very well as long as part of your team. And then you're looking at the end of those 3 weeks or a month and saying, wow, that is an insane amount of work that we've accomplished in a very short amount of time, right? And it was very difficult to get up to speed and to give that sound recommendation. And we've done it, right? And at the end of that, there's quite a degree of fulfillment in that. And also, I think we toss around the word imposter syndrome a lot in consulting, which is you're not quite sure whether you fit in or whether you have the right capabilities or expertise to do the job. And then you get these moments of clarity, such as after this, let's say, high stress, high difficulty theoretical project, in which you realize you are quite capable and fit for the job. So there's, let's say, moments like that where it is quite fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to add on to what Carlos said, being able to see the impact of that work is sometimes really cool as well. Like at the end of a long push at the end of a project, being able to see something implemented or see your clients' lives made easier. I would say that's like not obviously the greatest thing ever, like just your work doing what it's supposed to do. But sometimes it is rewarding. I would say, though, for me, the best part has been just kind of as I've aged up in the company, being able to continue to mentor people. That transition from school or athletics or whatever into the real world is not easy for anyone. So kind of being able to be someone who's like been through it and has advice and those types of things has been rewarding for me. And it's been cool to help people and to kind of see them be successful as they transition into their consulting careers.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's something that student athletes can definitely relate to, kind of what Carlos was saying in terms of making that transition. But so I know you guys kind of already talked about getting into this kind of recruiting cycle early, trying to be proactive about it and know if you like it or not to kind of figure out what you want to do after. But specifically, like, how did you guys find your position and how can students best find consulting positions in general?
so
I would
Carlos
say,
and Caroline, you should
oh,
do
sorry.
yours.
Go ahead,
MBA
Billy.
has a specific kind of timeline and everything. So you guys can do yours.
Yeah.
I'll say this, the industry is weird right now. We're in a weird time. Carlos, I don't know if you're the same, but we are
Absolutely.
not hiring as many people as we used to. I would say earlier the better. Consulting recruitment, at least for the bigger firms, is summer and fall. Anyone you can connect with at that company who can potentially get you a referral is always a great thing. But I would just say as much as you can do to get your foot in the door and stay on the early side is the best thing to do right now.
Yeah, I would second that. I think, let's say, your career is often like a result of two factors, which is your own talent and capabilities, but also you have to have quite a good bit of luck. And unfortunately, you guys are graduating or might be graduating into a bit of a weaker labor market. So back in 2021, 2022, when I graduated, frankly, big tech or consulting soaked up all these graduates. And we are far from that environment now. And you see some of the, let's say, recent headlines, probabilities of recession in this year going up or whatnot. It calls for a difficult hiring environment. So that isn't to say that this is impossible. By no means is that the case, but this is more difficult than it was before. So you have to be more differentiated than you might have been before. You have to have kind of closer ties than you might have had before. You already have a very good advantage and head start with the fact that you're student athletes, and a lot of these innate qualities that consulting firms are looking for, you have and can clearly demonstrate. But you really have to build on that. I think early and active engagement is key. So reaching out to different links in your network is great. Also attending recruiting events. I think even though there might be a bit of a slow in hiring, a lot of consulting companies still attend in-person events. I know we do at Michigan. So building some of those in-person connections, staying connected to those people that you meet is absolutely key.
And I know we touched earlier on the non-traditional path to consulting. I would say that just if it doesn't happen, if you're a senior and this is what you want to do, and it doesn't happen this year, it doesn't mean it's going anywhere. I'm sure Billy and Carlos are the same way, but experienced hires are really big in this industry. We have people coming from all over. So it doesn't really matter where you start. I would say if this is your goal, even if it doesn't happen immediately, to just keep pushing and keep trying to talk to people and network and get your foot in the door any way you can.
I think it's important to kind of note you guys' candid advice about trying to differentiate yourself because you're right. Like you do have, an advantage being a student athlete, but it is important to have that professional experience where you can get it. We know it can be difficult as student athletes to find that time, especially, I don't even know, Carlos, how you definitely did that because you were a fall sport. Like that's very challenging. But like do what you got to do and make time for what you can because it will pay off. So glad that you guys are kind of giving them candid advice such as that.
Yeah,
Um,
but
go ahead.
maybe just to add one thing, it's leverage let's say the career offices that you have around you. So it's wonderful that you guys have the Michigan Athletics Career Development Office. I was also fortunate enough to be part of Ross, and the career development offices there were really, really helpful. If you're in engineering or if you're in LSA, I'm sure they have a kind of their equivalent. So touch base with your career development officer, and I should be very strong guidance and advice as to how to address this. But sorry to cut you off there, Gabby.
No, you're fine. That's great. So next, like you guys kind of already talked about some of the challenges with like work-life balance, but what are some challenges of your respected positions and industry? Billy, do you want to take that one?
Well, the government is a bit of a mess right now. But it kind of goes to what everyone has. It's client demand, and what consulting, at least in my mind, is, if you talk about it at large, is whatever the client wants that will bring your firm money. And so being able to adapt to that client demand that changes constantly requires a lot from your leadership, but also you and but yeah, I mean, you're kind of almost always on call if something happens, and so that's like a personal challenge. But if anyone wants to talk about the government, I could talk about how that for days. But I think that's a general point.
For sure.
Gabby, to your question, I think time management, you have to maybe two pieces of advice. You have to be very deliberate. So you have to, let's say at the onset of your week, you have to say, okay, well, I have these important meetings on Thursday or Tuesday or whatnot. How can I structure the things I want to do around these points, right? So you have to be very deliberate. Well, I have an important deliverable on Monday, so therefore I probably have to stay a bit later on Monday, but then on Tuesday, maybe I'll be free. And then I can maybe get a workout in or go to dinner with friends or whatever it is, right? So you have to look at your week ahead and be very deliberate while planning for that. And also being open and communicative with your team, right? So as you garner that credibility and transparency with your team, it's, hey, I have a hard commitment on Thursday night or on Wednesday that I would like to attend. And consulting I found is cool because you don't have, let's say, a very strict schedule, a 9 to 5 schedule, right? Oftentimes it's way beyond that. But in times where maybe it's a bit slow or you're ramping up or ramping down a project, you don't have to be in the office at 9. Maybe you have a morning call that you can take from home, and then you find a way to commute in afterwards. Maybe you start later and end later. So there's a lot of flexibility to make what you will of your days and your hours, but being very deliberate about planning for that, and also being very transparent with your team about the things you'd like to do,
Mhm.
I think have helped me find time and manage that work-life balance a bit more.
Nice.
I know I said earlier that people management was one of the things I felt the most prepared for, but I would also say that it is probably the most challenging. Just in my role, being able to understand different types of people, understand how you're supposed to communicate with different types of clients, different types of people within your organization, and just being able to code switch and understand when you can speak to someone in a certain tone in a certain matter of fact way, and other times when you need to be really professional. Um, it's definitely been a bit of a learning curve, and I think everyone kind of has that as they move into the working world. But definitely dealing with people from all different backgrounds and all over the world has been challenging, but continuing to learn and grow from that.
Yeah. But developing that cultural competency or whatever it is definitely important. So you're definitely gaining really valuable skills there. Carlos, quick follow-up. Like when you do communicate your schedule and when you're deliberate about that, how is that usually taken from your
Yeah,
team?
it's taken a while. You have to kind of do so in a smart way, right? So if it's you have an important presentation on Friday, it's rather unlikely that you can, let's say, book the entire Thursday afternoon or night for yourself. But you learn how to kind of manage that, and I think you'll see that other team members are also doing similar. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of like families in consulting. So mothers or fathers taking time off to be with kids. Let's say I have a principal that I work with often. I know that from the hours of 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., he's going to be offline because he wants to spend time with his daughter. And then thereafter, he can be reached. So
Mhm.
you begin to kind of create that, let's say, structure within your schedules, and everyone does it, right? And as I've said, maybe at first 6 months, 8 months is a bit more difficult to have that confidence and to create those blocks for yourself. But as you gain credibility and traction within the firm, you are really encouraged to do so. And I mean, my personal experience at Roland Berger, it's a positive culture in which we encourage those times, because if not, it's just you're frankly going to get burned out. You'll leave, and then that doesn't really help anyone, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's better that.
That's great. Something that is definitely a learning curve too is communicating boundaries. So it's great
Yeah.
to hear you guys do that. So to student athletes, if you guys have questions, can you go ahead and put them in the chat? We have one more question left for the panelists until we get to you guys' questions. So feel free to fill up the chat with your personal questions. But the last question that we have is, can you share 3 personal qualities that you look for in an intern or in a job applicant? Anyone can take it.
So,
Probably,
oh, go ahead, Caroline.
I was going to say eager to learn, organized slash detail oriented, and sociable to a degree.
I
Yeah.
think those are great. I would just second that. To add further.
I will say, and eager to learn. I think one of the things that I look for a little bit on top of that is the ability to figure stuff out without bothering me or a senior manager. But no, it's an underrated skill. One of the things that you get with these big firms is access to a huge database. You get access to a lot of data, a lot of tools, all this thing, and the ability to problem solve at your level before immediately escalating is something that I always look for from younger folks who want to join our team.
Mm-hmm. Problem solving. That's what you guys are doing is solving problems and then taking initiative and trying to do it themselves. Even if they do fall short, they can ask questions. But no, that's good. Definitely to see that initiative is
Yeah.
a quality for sure.
And maybe just one final thing to add on that point is uh, be, don't be afraid to be vocal and to be kind of a, let's say, very active member of the team. We encourage, let's say, a flat hierarchy where interns or new joiners will really be in tasked with real responsibilities and real work. We don't want you just to be a fly on the wall. So kind of ask the relevant questions. As Billy has said, after doing your research, after kind of trying to tackle the problem, like let's not resort to asking, let's say, other levels of management as your first resort. But after you feel like you've thought about the problem and addressed it, and you really can't find a way to move forward, be vocal about that. So in a way, you're very efficient. Don't spin your wheels, which is something I did for hours during my internship, trying to figure it out when frankly, I didn't have, let's say, capabilities to figure it out. So be a very active part of that team in, let's say, EQ, high EQ way, right? Which I
Mhm.
think
Yeah,
you're all capable of.
I totally agree with that. And that is more of what I meant. But we've had a rash of young folks not be able to Google something. So that's a little bit
I'm
frustrating.
sure.
Yeah.
Fair. So we do have a question in the chat. Ozon's asking a very real question. How do you decide between athletics and an internship for your junior summer?
It's a very tough question.
Mm.
I frankly prioritized internships after during my summers, and I just found a way to train around them. So it wasn't one or the other. And to be perfectly frank, I didn't play on summer teams or the full summer. I didn't play on summer teams because of internship commitments. But even throughout internships, I was waking up in the morning to train or training in the afternoon, and you try to find a bit of that semblance of balance. But I mean, I don't think there's a blanket recommendation as to whether it's internships or athletics. I would just say it's very difficult to do both. And if you can somehow pull it off, it's very rewarding and it will definitely set you up for success.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would second that. I feel like there have to be fully virtual positions out there that you could do and continue to train in Ann Arbor. Um, I actually did not intern. I swam all summers that I was at Michigan and just kind of tried to take classes and keep learning. Um, I don't know. I would be frank potentially with recruiters that you would need that sort of flexibility, but at the end of the day, I would say, yeah, as Carlos said, there is no blanket recommendation. As much as you can find something that potentially works with your schedule, I think try and do it, but really no right answer there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe take some reassurance in the sense that there is no orthodox, typical way into consulting. I think we screen and consider people from all backgrounds, and that sort of balance between you doing both athletics and professional experience, it may be difficult to accomplish in a very, let's say, structured hierarchical company. Like large companies may be difficult to accommodate these sorts of nuanced, flexible positions, but we really consider people from all backgrounds. So if you're, let's say, if you figured out, I want to do athletics, and it's going to take 4 to 5 hours a day in the morning or in the afternoon, maybe you can work with smaller companies or local businesses to be able to help and work with them uh, in a way that accommodates that schedule, right? So don't feel the need to have this internship at EY or McKinsey or Bain or BCG or Roland Berger to be able to be kind of a good fit and have that expertise into consulting. We really just want to see you, let's say, challenge yourself in a professional environment, uh, whatever context that is. It's maybe not as important if we see that you're balancing multiple things on and can discipline yourself in that way. That's even more valuable, frankly.
Right. And I feel like too, it can be a challenge when you feel like your coach wants you to stay and train or be, stuck to a very strict regimen. And that's when it comes into, be disciplined during the season and the preseason and show them that you're trustworthy and that, they will be more lenient to give you those opportunities and work with you to possibly get different workout plans that you can do if you're not able to get a remote internship. But we also have the micro internships as well. So take advantage of those things that you can do while you're in season. I think they run during the winter break usually. So talk to Julie and Maurice about that as well. But does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up and give you guys contact information and send you on your way? Okay. Carlos mentioned that having a robust resume helps a lot when hunting for jobs in consulting. And maybe you just answered this, but what exactly does it look like and how can you accomplish that?
Yeah, I think so. You guys have, let's say, a very strong cornerstone in athletics. That's something that recruiters will see and immediately it kind of will tick off as something being very attractive and a good fit for the position. But it's also a semblance of professional experience. So after my freshman and sophomore years, I interned one in operations in oil and gas and the other in corporate banking. So that's maybe a bit of an extreme, but looking at, for example, what Gabby mentioned around these micro internships sounds really interesting. Having, let's say, professional experience is important to have on your resume, as well as, let's say, a degree of interest or specialization in the classes you're taking. So when I was at Ross, I really liked my finance class. I was a TA or something along those lines for one of those classes, and it was something I was able to speak to in both the resume and also throughout the interview process, right? So maybe just to simplify, you have the athletics already. Professional experience is really, really, I think, important to have. It's best that when applying your first professional experience, maybe shouldn't be that internship. And again, this doesn't have to be very formal. It can be a micro internship. It can be some sort of working with small businesses or local businesses. That would be great. And then academic inclination, curiosity, specialization would also be great to show that. So maybe think of those as three potential cornerstones, but not sure what Caroline or Billy you might have to add here.
Mhm.
No, I would agree with that. Having student athlete on your resume is awesome, but anything else that you can add to that to show that, you know, you've been passionate about your studies, you've been passionate about things that are outside of athletics that are transferable into the quote unquote working world. It's great.
Right.
Maybe very just tangibly, make your resume one page and make sure it's
Yes.
formatted in a professional way. Just very simple things. And you can work with the Michigan Athletics Career Office for that, or whatever respective schools you're at for that. I think we become very accustomed to screening and reading resumes in a particular format. And if they're done so in such a way, it's nice. If not, it's the slightest nuisance, but just a slight bit of advice.
Fair advice. Anything to add, anyone else? Or are we? I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, but student athletes, we do have their contact information. They have all said that you guys are, feel free to reach out to them, ask questions, email. And then one thing that I wanted to add on is like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy like Carlos was saying. It can be, local people, your student athletes, people want to talk to you, even if it is just like, 15, 20-minute coffee chat. I've never had someone say no to me. I'm sure these other three can co-sign as well. So make sure you just take that initiative and keep being leaders and best. So with that, we will close. And for V4L, I'm pretty sure we're going to do it manually. So we can thank Caroline, Carlos, and Billy for their time. And you guys have a great night. Thank you.